Welcome back to the Dopest Show. You won't get sick of. I'm Spencer, and this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the dumb stuff I did to get put in prison. Also got quite a few about the crazy stuff that actually happened when I was in prison. God forbid you end up in prison. You want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So, my buddy Pinto would remember this fella. I'm not going to say his name. Oftentimes I don't say names of people, with certain privacy things. But this person, if you saw him, it was impossible to not remember him. Because he had, a unique look because of something that happened that changed the rest of his life. And I will tell you this. Jay Williams talked about a story, and that's what made me think about this dude. Only it's the complete opposite in terms of how this guy was looked at, how this guy was treated. Because in Jay Williams' story, it was a guy who had done some vicious stuff. And, he was missing, a lot of his jaw and a lot of his face, and he had to, cover one side of his mouth or something. I'm a big fan of Jay. I've listened all the way to and from North Carolina twice a week, 5-hour round trip jiu-jitsu. So I've heard every one he's done. And that one, I paused it to tell my fiance Casey this story. Every time I hear one of his, it'll remind you of people you met. There's a lot of similar people and similar situations. It's, different specifics. But anyway, his story was about somebody who was vicious and awful. And it sounded like that guy was a little bit older. This guy was young. This guy was he couldn't have been much older than me. Now, the first time that I saw this fella was on the weight pile. See, at the low security, they have a weight pile. It's outside. It's got a pavilion over top of it so you can lift in the rain. It's not whatever. And I was out there all the time. My buddy JB, Chicken Man, he didn't like cold, okay? Chicken Man's crazy as could be. He said, don't you know black people don't like cold? Shoot, he said, I'll see you back when it warms up. Because I kept trying to get him to come out there, and, he wouldn't come out and lift. And, they got me right in that whole bit. But, and a unique thing also with lifting, and this goes into this. So now, to get into a crew a lot of the time, crews look at you as a reflection of how they're going to be judged. People want to have a strong crew. The bar gets passed every hour. Every 10 minutes, the compound's open for you to move to and from the building, to and from rec, to and from wherever you have to go. There are 7 bars that get passed group to group every hour. And it's the same groups. There's a whole system to it. There are people that run out, get the weights, sit on the weights, and they get paid a few bucks. It gets paid a few bucks, usually $20 a crew a month, unless you want to run out and sit on the weights. I'd rather pay my $5 and not have to sit out there for, an hour waiting for somebody to come get them when I'm not even lifting. So anyway, you have to have somebody to get in a crew. You can't just go lift weight. Chomos typically did not lift weight. There are some people that used to accept it anyway, but there are a whole bunch of barbells, so they take them off and do that type of thing. This guy was big. This guy was strong. I mean, you could see this guy had lifted. And I see, you see somebody new with a crew of people that you know. And you're like, oh, it's somebody new. And, I see somebody, I remember he had his back turned to me, and whenever he turned around, I made eye contact with him, and I didn't mean to stare, but I couldn't help it. Okay. It's like this little, it looked like something, I'm not trying to be mean to the fella, but it looked like, somebody I'd seen in one of them Rob Zombie movies. It was this little nub thing. And, everything was real close together. And, I didn't mean to stay, and I quickly looked away. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings or disrespect somebody, anything like that. But, yeah, it was it was such a deformity. I can't imagine living with that because, literally, if this was the first time you saw this person, you couldn't help but look twice. You couldn't help but look an extra few seconds, okay? I can't imagine having to deal with that. So, eventually, he ended up coming over to my crew that I worked out with. See, I switched my last little bit of time. This was during the last bit of time that I was in there. I switched with Chicken Man and all them, and there was a situation where I ended up getting the remote and having one of the 7 TVs, and I had to be in there to regulate that because there were people that were just fools. They would come in there and try to bully people and stuff like that, and I'd sit in there all day basically controlling that TV, my last little bit, and try to regulate. Me and Talib, called him the Gray Beard. I need to get him on here. He's not too far away. he only watched it a few hours a day though. When I went out to lift, he typically kept it going. He had his shows Rizzoli and Isles. I laugh because big old gangster did 17 years in prison, watching Rizzoli and Isles every week. Story about like two women detectives. I'd give him hell over that. I'd rip on him over that. But anyway, I started going out at lunchtime. And everybody else would go eat lunch. I'd go out and lift, and I'd stay out there usually till, I'd say probably till about 2 o'clock. And this guy started coming out during that time. Now I had a handful of people, and I'd kind of flip the script on it. Instead of having a whole bunch of strong people reflecting and everything, I could lift a little bit at this point. I'd been doing it. I couldn't do it when I got there, but I've been in prison for 5 years, and I obsessively lifted. I had a guy who was writing my meal plans and everything, but I got these young fellas that's trying to build up and showed them what worked for me, so then they could skip the BS and all that. All those forced reps and stuff is just a waste of time, in my opinion. But anyway, somehow he ended up asking if he could come lift with us, and absolutely. I'm a really nice guy when it comes to that. Unless somebody's a problem, trying to dictate stuff and everything else, yeah, absolutely. So he started working out with us, and this dude was strong. He's a tank. He's a white dude, and everything about him looked normal except for this one little thing right there. And it wasn't a glass jaw. It wasn't his jaw, and it took a long time. I was known for training jiu-jitsu in the gym. In the gym, at low security, there are no cameras except for one outside camera on the outside rec yard. In the gym, no cameras. Now, there's a CO that works back in there, but there's this little room with treadmills and stuff, and ellipticals, and it was probably about 15 by 20, 25 foot. And there were two entrances, just open ways where you could walk, but there was a wall, and we'd have somebody look out when we trained, and that was how we did it. And he, was asking about that, just asking a whole bunch of questions. I was telling him, hey man, you should do it. You'd love it. I said, I can't wait to get out. I've already researched the places I'm going to be training at when I get out. And I've got some wild stories about that too. I put myself at risk of going to prison to train jiu-jitsu with world champions once I got out of prison. That sounds stupid, but it's a pretty cool story. I'll tell it later. And I was telling him, I was asking him where he lives, because we have an email system in the prison. They can't send pictures, but they can copy and paste. And I'd have all kinds of stuff copy and paste about every different state. I was planning on moving to Las Vegas for a little bit. That's what's something wild, talking about Rick from Vegas Prison Story. That's a good dude too, if you haven't seen his channel. But Rob Drysdale's there. I got pictures of my mom, pictures of me with Rob Drysdale. That's Frank Mir, Randy Couture, and Chuck Liddell's jiu-jitsu coach. Joanna, the Polish girl, yeah, her too. He's got so many people he's coached. He was like literally, he tapped out the Michael Jordan of jiu-jitsu, Marcelo Garcia. He was undefeated in MMA, but I was planning on moving out there. So I had all this copy and paste, and I knew stuff about where he was from, and I was telling him about certain gyms. He's telling me, no, he couldn't do it because of his jaw, or his not jaw. And I was, we started talking about, MMA at first, but then jiu-jitsu, I was like, well, you could do that. He's like, no, I can't have anything that puts me at any risk. And he had speech issues, as you might imagine. And as we became friends and everything else, he would tell you about it if you asked him. But me, being that type of person, I'm not just going to ask somebody that I don't know something that's as personal and private as that. So I waited for a good bit about it. I'd heard from a couple other people, a little speculation on it, just he said, she said about what he had said. And, I asked him one day, I'm like, well, man, what's the deal, with what you got going on? What can you do? So I can't have anything at any risk of it. Now, something Jay talked about in his video, I hadn't really given much thought to. But Jay was basically saying the guy that he was talking about that was an awful person. That's the big difference between this. This guy is a young guy, good dude. It sounded like the guy in that video tried to take his family out or something, And yeah, so if you get an injury and it's where a serious crime happens and you don't get bond, anything like that, you got to rely on what the government's going to pay for to fix you. Okay? So if something awful happens to you, like, your jaw gets taken off, you have to rely on the government to fix your face. Okay? some scary stuff, because you can end up looking basically disfigured for the rest of your life, possibly, because by the time everything heals, it might not be possible to get something to fix it the way it should be fixed once you get out. And this guy really didn't deserve to have what he had happen to him. Now, yeah, he was hustling, he was selling. He was a level above, street deal. He was like a dealer's dealer. He wasn't like kingpin and stuff or nothing like that. But like he was a level up, and he sold to a number of people, and he lived, in kind of country area, and he was doing a reasonable amount of things. And in country areas, you get hit off. Okay, the same thing that you would do in a country area, you get caught doing it in, let's say, New York City, you get a fraction of the time. Of course, mandatory minimums in the federal, that's going to dictate some stuff around the board. But yeah, he went to this guy's house, who he was friends with, who he also supplied, and he said this guy had problem. It's kind of like he was friends with them, but like I'd say more acquaintances, but they were cool and everything else, and he'd go over there and hang out a little bit. And this particular night, when you deal with certain substances, especially speed, that's a bad one, by the way. A lot of the times, the assaults that are like that on women and children, the unspeakable trauma type stuff, and just piece of trash type stuff. I believe it's something like 75 or 80% of the ones that were under the influence of speed. Okay, under crystal. So that's a big statistic. So basically so that's one thing, but there's just this paranoid violence that you see that is recurring and so frequent, because as opposed to, like coke, people just get scared and they peek at the window, stay in a corner. Now, they're scared and they probably would do something, but they're a little bit too scared to do something. When people get on speed, they'll get paranoid, and rather than being scared, they'll be like, I'll be damned. I'll get them before they get me. That type of thing. People hear stuff. Two people in the next room are talking about the weather. Your brain will morph stuff to where you hear them saying, "Yeah, whenever he comes back, we're gonna snatch him up. We're gonna do this. We're gonna rob him. We're gonna call the police." I mean, I'm telling you something. This is some crazy stuff right here. I got in an argument with somebody that didn't exist through a vent system of an apartment. I heard somebody that was street as could be, sounded tough, sounded ghetto as could be, and I was arguing through this vent. The vent can't go from one apartment to another. I didn't have any sense to know that. I was practically a kid. But I noticed after a week of doing this, there's just a little old white woman that came out of the room. Wasn't no way that the person I was arguing with didn't exist. I mean, yeah, so it gets that delusional. So he went over there, and this guy's probably, day 3 or plus on a long binge. He's in a state. And he goes over there, and his girl's telling him, you need to take yourself to bed. You need to chill out on this stuff. And he gets a little bit too rough. He gets a little bit physical, a little too violent. And this guy, is doing the right thing, pulled him off of her when, pulled him off of her. It sounded like he banged him up. Told him, what's wrong with you? You don't ever put your hands on a woman. She's just telling you what you needed to hear. You needed to go to sleep. What's wrong with you? And, he was checking on her and everything else. Well, the guy comes back in there, and he basically was like, big mistake, mother. And he starts to draw on him. Starts to pull on him. Well, they end up in a tussle. They're both fighting hand in hand. And, there's something between their hand, that they're fighting for it. That's a scary situation. I've seen situations like that, been in situations like that, and it's the scariest thing on the planet. Whether it's a knife or whether it's a piece, it's scary. If you're hand in hand with somebody and there is something that y'all are fighting for that has the potential to, change your life or take your life, it's scary stuff. So during this tussle, it sounds like the guy who he was tussling with gets hit first, and it hits him in the leg. And then the second one got him in the jaw. Now, let's break this down real quick. Even though he was doing the right thing, standing up for this girl that, a piece of trash was putting hands on, he is a drug dealer. He is there selling drugs. And now, sounds like this piece, it doesn't have a name to it. So basically, he had his hands on this piece, and it sounds, he's a felon. So, I mean, that's pretty much 5 off the rip. You're a felon, you got a piece. Now, felon in combination with stuff, it's going to add some time onto it. Now, his jaw is gone. It has been destroyed. It has been put into more pieces than can be put back together. Now, I believe 50 Cent has a glass jaw, if I'm not mistaken. But they gave him a glass jaw and they put that together. Sasha, get out there. Sniffing under the door. You sound like you're doing a line of blow over there. People going to think you a junkie. Stop that stuff. Lord have mercy. She sniffs under that door to see if anybody's nearby. Good dog. But anyhow, he gets taken to the hospital, and it's, basically, he doesn't get the care that he needs. And rather than everything else with the follow-up surgeries and everything else like they would typically do if you're just a free person, he didn't have that luxury because the government's going to pay for it because he's in custody, and he ends up in federal custody. And those cheap sons of ain't going to pay for nothing. They let people die in the prisons that are begging them to take me to the hospital. I talked about that the other day. So what he told me was basically they took a bone out of his leg, like a little. They shaved a little bone that's like that out of his leg, and they made him this little jaw that they attached. I'd never heard of anything like that before. Never heard of it before or since. But this was not a regular jaw. It was a tiny little bone out of a leg, I reckon. I guess I don't know much about, that type of thing, but it sounded correct because this was a small little thing that they had attached, and all this looked normal. But then you just had this little thing right here, and you had 2 big giant scars right here. Okay, like those 2 scars like this. Okay, well it's 2 but big like there, and this little lamp right there. And basically, he can't risk anything touching it because it's a crap job on fixing his face. They did an awful job. They didn't put the money into it, and that's awful. I hate that for him. And when you really look at it, he was doing a good thing. I mean, he might have saved that girl's life. The one positive thing out of this was the biggest thing I kept thinking was, God, this guy's young. He done built himself up and everything, and maybe he works out and everything, find him a girl to overlook it and everything else. But it sounds like the girl who he took up for, he was friends with, and it sounds like she planned on being with him when he got out. That was a silver lining because that was the biggest thing I thought. I went to prison, my early 20s, and I thought, man, I'm going to be dang near 30 when I get out. How am I going to find a girl, start a family, everything else? It was just something that I thought in my head. How am I going to find a decent girl? I'm a felon now, in prison, this, and that. And I thought that for myself, feeling sorry for myself, and I didn't have nothing like this. But when I saw him, I thought, man, how's he going to get out and find him one when he gets out? Going to have to find one special that's willing to overlook that. But the girl, I found out from him, was coming to visit him. She appreciated him. She says basically he saved her life. And she's grateful for what happened. So yeah, it's an awful, terrible thing. I mean, that will leave him being stared at probably the rest of his life. If we're just going to be honest about everything here, it's very unlikely that he's going to get surgeries that would fix his look completely. Okay, I imagine it's quite expensive. I imagine it's been too much time because it'll have been over a decade that he's been in prison by the time he gets out and could do it. So everything's healed and set and grown back into place, And so it was cool to hear that, that girl and him, that they, and you'd see him in the visiting room with her. And it was a cool thing to see. That made me happy. There's a silver lining to it. When I hear things that I think like are injustices and stuff like that, it burns me up and it eats me up all to pieces. But basically because of that night, that's why he went to federal prison. There were drugs involved, that piece involved too, That's going to enhance it. Sounds like he's a felon from before. So, yeah, he got him a rack of time. And on top of that, imagine being in prison and you got this little job built on you that, first off, you're going to get looks. Second off, somebody might say something in which you're going to want to fight them because they're a prick for saying it, first off. But second off, just basic prison politics of standing up for yourself. But third, if you do get in a fight, that little thing could break. And then what are you going to do? What kind of trouble are you going to be in then? I mean, that's the biggest thing for me. Like, I can't imagine. He's compromised. If he got in a fight and that thing got hit, I can't imagine it would take very much to break it. I cannot imagine it would take much at all to break it. This was a small little thing they had built for him. So not being able to fight in prison and everything else, but also the same night that you did something good trying to save somebody, yeah, you were in the wrong life and all that stuff, but whatever, did you deserve to have that? I don't think so. And that guy was the one that took it to that level. He didn't take it to that level. He defended himself. He fought for his life. But, that's not quite how it works. When you are a dealer, the whole self-defense thing becomes a very tricky place. A lot of the times, self-defense is not something that is brought into question. And, yeah, I feel bad for him for everything he went through. Having to live like that, having to go through what he went through, having to do something that was good. He probably saved that girl's life that night. If that guy was willing to pull on him and ready to go and everything that happened, if he hadn't done what he'd done, what would have happened to that girl? And that's the question you got to ask. So anyway, got more stories about him. We talked a good bit in there. He worked out with me for a good bit. Cool dude, seriously. Probably find him, probably track him down. I don't know if he'd want to come on here and talk about this type of thing, but I mean, it would be a good deterrent for some people that are living that type of life. I'm about positive I can find him, but if I can, and he's willing to, I absolutely will. Good person. Now, certain things happen, they make you a better person or a worse person. He was a very nice guy. I don't know if it was always that way or if it had something to do with, the aftermath of everything in that. But him being as nice as he was made it suck that much more, because when you become friends with somebody and, like you actually, see his person as a good dude and you see what's happened, you're like, God, it sucks. Got a lot of empathy. I do. I'm put myself in people's places, and it just, with that, like, I can't imagine. And he, like I said, he was young. I mean, this guy's in his 20s. And this is something he's going to have to live with the rest of his life. I'm sure it's going to have issues and everything else, and I doubt it will ever be fully fixed. It would take a lot of money, to fix this because of everything setting in so long. But anyway, if you liked the video, press the like button. If not, that's 23 minutes and 24 seconds of your life, which you'll never get back. And for that, I'm truly sorry. But I do hope you like this one. Y'all have a good one.